Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shantihi Shantihi Over the past few years, as part of this study group, we have studied one Upanishad, the Isha Upanishad. And last year we were studying the 10 Shanti mantras and we completed them. This year, for us, the year starts in October. The new year. We plan to study this text known as Śvetāśvatara Upanishad. First of all, why do we study these texts, these ancient texts? What is the importance? Even before Sage Patanjali mentions asana, yogic postures as a practice of yoga, he mentions the yamas and niyamas, non-violence, etc. yamas. And in the niyamas, he mentions one practice in his words. It is called Swadhyaya. The word that he uses for this practice is called Swadhyaya. Swa means self and adhyaya means to study. So initially, in the understanding of the commentators of the Yoga Sutras, of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Swadhyaya is understood as studying the texts, the teachings which talk about Swa, which talk about ourselves. Which explore the depths that lie within the human body, within the human mind, within the human consciousness. The teachings that the masters have given us after they have actually practiced yoga, lived a yogic way of life. And the word yoga always, whenever it is used, whether it is used by Patanjali, whether it is used in the Upanishads, it is in the sense of meditation, focused retention of one's attention, meditative awareness. So when they led a life which was in accordance to cultivate this meditative state of mind. And as they explored the inner world through those practices, the experiences that they had, they are known as the yogic teachings. And to study them as a preparation to study eventually oneself directly in meditation, which is the second and the deeper meaning of Svadhyaya. To study the mind, to study one's thoughts, to just merely witness. Observe, I think, is the correct word. To observe the body in asana, to observe the breath in prana, to observe the mind in meditation, and then ultimately, not only to observe the mind, but to observe that which is observing everything, which is observing the body, which is observing the breath, and which is observing these continuous streams of thought. To observe the observer. All that is included under Svadhyaya. And the yogic masters, in their commentary on the Yoga Sutra, always couple together Svadhyaya and the famous word yoga. Svadhyaya as the theoretical aspect, and yoga as the practical aspect of asana, the practical aspect of pranayama, the practical aspect of meditation, which comes under yoga. And there is a beautiful saying which has been quoted by Vyasa in his commentary on the Yoga Sutras, that go deeper into your practice of yoga with the help of Svadhyaya, and deepen your understanding of Svadhyaya with the practice of yoga. So both of them, the practical aspect as well as the deeper theoretical aspect underpinning those practices, known as Svadhyaya. When a practitioner of yoga, the saying goes, when a practitioner of yoga accumulates the wealth that is to be accumulated through Svadhyaya and through the practice of yoga, then the light within, the light of consciousness is revealed, gets revealed. Paramatma prakashati, that supreme nature, the true nature of the self, the radiant nature of the self gets revealed when a person finds a balance between these two. Svadhyaya, self-study, self-observation, and the practical aspects of yoga. So while on one side we focus on asana, we focus on pranayama as preparation for meditation, by incorporating meditation into our asana practice, as is Guruji's approach, into our pranayama practice, but at the same time also exploring not only sage Patanjali's teachings, but the teachings that sage Patanjali himself explored. Shvetashvatara Upanishad, this Upanishad that we are about to study, is one such extremely ancient work on yoga, which undoubtedly Patanjali, who as a historical figure came at least 200 years after this text was composed, and the present dating of the Yoga Sutras at around 200 AD means that the present Yoga Sutras, whoever authored and compiled the Yoga Sutras in the present form, must have lived around 500 to 600 years after this text was composed. Just to summarize why the teaching and the studying of these texts is important, because as the Upanishadic masters of yoga, I think इसको थोड़ा गीला कर लेता हूँ. Why do we practice yoga? A question that should repeatedly asked ourselves. Self-control. We speak of self-control. We speak of gaining control over one's physical body. We speak of gaining control over the breath. We speak of gaining control over the mind. This is what the yogic practices help us do. But that's just the first aspect. The teachings of the Upanishadic masters, that is called Dhamma. Dhamma, which means self-control. And this is an extremely important aspect of being a human, because the only thing that differentiates this animal-like body from other living beings is that lies in the Sanskrit word for human, which is manushya, someone who thinks before they do, which means they can stop, they have some control over themselves. We as human beings hopefully have this capacity, and at least we can evolve it through the practice of yoga, even if we don't have it, that we can think about the consequences of our actions before actually committing them. That's the Sanskrit word for human, man, woman, this man, a Proto-Indo-European root, which means to think. Manushya, someone who thinks before they do. The yogic masters have their own terminology. For example, pashu, the Sanskrit word for animal, means a being that is bound by the bondage of ignorance. Pasha means bondage. So someone who is bound by the bondage of ignorance is pashu. Also a word used for human beings. And then there are the asuras who constantly engage in the pursuit of the gratification of the senses on the cost of others, which means they don't care whether somebody else has to suffer, has to die, but I have to please my desires, I have to fulfill my desires. Such individuals are referred to as the asuras. And then are the barbaras, the barbarians, which are defined in yoga as the ones who realize their mistake only after they have committed it. They have done it, oh my God, this was a big mistake, I should not have done it. So on those who realize after having committed a mistake, or at least they realize, then they are referred to as non-civilized barbarians. And civilized human beings are the ones that think, that contemplate, that can analyze the effects of their actions, the consequences of their actions before actually committing them. Such individuals are referred to as manushya, as human beings, and deva, of course, the radiant ones, are the ones that live in the light of wisdom. But from where does this start? It starts with Dhamma, self-control, having control over one's self. And for this, the practice of yoga, in its all three major aspects, whether it is asana, as a method of acquiring control, and these three aspects of our being, they are deeply interconnected. It's just that one is more physical, the other one is breath is even more subtle, and the mind is increasingly subtle. But all the three are deeply interconnected, and like the breath permeates the pranas, they permeate the entire body, also the mind permeates the entire body. The body is simply as a vessel. But the idea is always like an archer. First of all, we start practicing with a big goal, and then slowly and slowly the size of the goal is decreased. So this is the same with asana, with pranayama, and then eventually with meditation. But Dhamma is just the first aspect. Then, essential to being a human is also the second aspect, of which the masters speak, which is dana, sharing with others whatever we have accumulated as a result of tremendous hard work, to share it with others who are less fortunate and who don't have so much. So whatever we have accumulated, so this is also an important aspect of being a human being. And then the third aspect, which is the most beautiful aspect of being a human being, is daya. Daya, which means compassion. When we see, and this is basic human nature, when we see a child about to fall, each one of us has this very natural tendency to run and to hold the child. It's a very natural human tendency. But just sometimes our hatreds, our selfish attachments, our fears come in between, and this human nature does not get expressed as frequently as it should be. And it is this reason that the Upanishadic masters of yoga, they say that these three, trayam shikshet, for them, education, shiksha, is to learn these three things. That's for them education. For them, if someone has cultivated self-control, has cultivated the tendency to share with others the results of our hard-earned work, and compassion, to be compassionate when we see suffering. Someone who has cultivated these three, Dhamma, Dana, Daya, such a person is for the Upanishadic masters, for the masters of the Upanishads, is a truly educated human being. So while yoga as a practice helps us in the first step, it is then the teachings of the masters that inspire us to take it further. After I have acquired control over myself, what to do? To share what you acquire as a result of that and be compassionate. So these three things go hand in hand together. Just to show you a little bit the scope of the teachings that are known as, this is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Now the Upanishad that we are about to study, as you can see from the brochure, the tiny little brochure given to you, from given to you, you can see that the title of this Upanishad is Śvetāśvatara Upanishad. The name of this Upanishad is Śvetāśvatara Upanishad. This is the text that we'll be studying for the rest of the year, which we are starting today, and for the rest of the year. Hopefully we are able to finish it in 1 year. These are just the first 9 verses. There are around 100 verses in it. It's a text of 6 chapters, which gradually we will study. Today I intend to spend some time summarizing what this work is about, the subject matter, and the meaning of the title, and why we chose this text to study this year. As the title suggests, it is called Śvetāśvatara Upanishad. The first word is Shvetashvatara. What does it mean? Shveta means white, radiant, and Ashvatara means horse, mule, white mule, white horse. That's the very literal translation of this title. Nothing that profound, which we would expect, except if we go a little bit deeper into the meaning of this word and into the symbology. It could be as simple as, it's the name of the teacher of this master, of the master of this Upanishad. Shvetashvatara is his name. It occurs towards the end of the text, where the text concludes that this was the teaching that was given by sage Shvetashvatara. So it's his name. And I think it was in ancient Aryan culture that taking animal names for humans was quite common. Even today in the West, Herr Vogel. In Germany, Mr. Bird. Such names do exist. And for example, one of the first great prophets, Zoroaster, the Iranian prophet of Zoroastrianism, Zarathustra was his name, which simply means an old camel. An old camel. Zarathustra. Old camel. So, old camel. Zarathustra. That's the meaning of his name. One of the greatest prophets who started the Zoroastrian religion, known today as the Parsi religion, which has survived in India after most of these Parsis, they came to India 1200 years ago after Iran was taken over by the Arabic Islamic invasion. But still, in Isfahan, some Parsis still do exist. However, here in this case, it could be as simple as this sage had a white mule which he used to travel from place to place to share his knowledge and wisdom. But of course, we should not forget that the horse in the Upanishads always signifies the senses. Indriyani hayan ahu. This human body is like a charioteer. The mind is compared to the reins, the intellect as the chariot driver, the individual consciousness residing in it as the master of the chariot, while the physical body is the chariot, and the senseless, they are always compared to the horses. So, radiant horses, the one with the radiant horses, the radiant and the masters, when they explain Śvetāśvatara, the commentators, the traditional commentators, when they explain the word Śvetāśvatara here, they say that someone whose horses, which means whose senses have become clean, purified, completely polished through the practice of the 8 limbs of yoga. Such a master is called Śvetāśvatara, and they straight away explain it as someone who is constantly engaged in the path of Ashtanga Yoga, in the path of the 8-limbed path of yoga, the 8 practices, which includes yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, etc., the 8 limbs. And as we see, this is indeed what the teachings of Śvetāśvatara contain. It contains teachings on asana, it contains teachings on pranayama, it contains teachings on meditation, it contains teachings on pratyahara, it contains teachings on the ideal place for the practice of yoga. It is all around the 8-limbed path of yoga. So Śvetāśvatara, and the word Shveta, which means radiant, light-like, we also use it to refer to Sage Patanjali. If you pronounce the prayer to Sage Patanjali with awareness and with understanding, then Sahasra Shirasam, what's the next word? Shveta. Sahasra Shirasam, 1,000-headed, which is again a deeply symbolical, it has a deep symbolical significance. And then the next word is Shveta, radiant like light, which in the understanding of yoga means, and again it is this Śvetāśvatara Upanishad which speaks about Mother Nature having 3 colors: radiant, red, and black. The radiant color is the color of light, of wisdom. The red color is the color of rajas, of passion. And Krishna, the dark color, the black color, is the color of tamas. So it is this Upanishads, and we see these 3 colors everywhere. For example, if you go to the other side, if you look at the fire pit, Havanagunda, where every evening Ganga Aarti takes place on the other side in Paramartha Niketan, this fire pit is black, red, and white, these 3 colors. So, while the color red is the color of agitation, the color black is the color of darkness, Shveta, white, the radiant, symbolizes that sattva guna, the quality of light, which is again what yoga is about, bringing rajas and tamas into balance so that there can be this balanced. Because if rajas is like a crest and tamas is like a trough, how do you said it right. It's good this one. Trough? No. Trough. Then the equilibrium in between is what Sattva stands for. So this Shveta, this white, this radiant, should not be taken as a complexion, but simply as a symbol to the color of light. And this is why also some of the commentators of the Yoga Sutras have also commented on Śvetāśvatara Upanishad. For example, Vijnana Bhikshu, one of the great commentators on the Yoga Sutras, whose commentary I like very much because he often speaks, unlike other scholastic commentators who speak from scholarship, he seems to be speaking from experience, from something that he has experienced. And that's why I like his commentary on the Yoga Sutras very much. And he has also written a commentary. One of the great commentators on the Yoga Sutras has also written a commentary on this Upanishad, which is the commentary that I will be following. So we can say that this is really the Upanishad of Ashtanga Yogis, of the practitioners of Ashtanga Yoga. One of the most ancient Upanishads that really speaks about asana, even asana, that speaks about pranayama, that speaks about really the practices of yoga. What is the meaning of the word Upanishad? I've explained it many, many times, but just to summarize the meaning once again, Upa means close, Ni means to sit, to down, and Shat means to sit. Shat is in fact the Sanskrit word to sit. That's why in the same way like in English, you decline sit, sat. Even in Sanskrit, Shat, Shidati, which means to sit. So it's really the same Proto-Indo-European root which has gone into English as sit. And in Sanskrit it is Shat, Shidati. So it means, the word Upanishad means to sit down near. That's the very literal meaning of the word Upanishad. Upa, near, Nishat, to sit down. First of all, the teachings of Upanishads arise whenever a student had a question, went to the teacher, sat down in front of the teacher, asked a question, and then whatever followed, all those ancient teachings, they came to be referred to as Upanishad. And this is what we will also see in this Upanishad. If you look at the first verse, then it starts with some of the fundamental questions that every human being as a child has asked and wants to know. At least I did. As a child, I had no idea of all these teachings, but I wanted to know, what am I seeing? What is this world? These basic questions, they just used to come into my mind. But then religion comes in, gives some answers, and we accept those answers. And then as we grow up, then we get so much busy in our lives that we even forget those questions. Forget about trying to find an answer. But whenever that childlike curiosity arises again in one's mind, and that happens, in the understanding of Patanjali, that happens when we reduce our possessions. Because when we are busy with so many possessions, we have to take care of this, we have to take care of this, we have to clean this, clean that, bring order into our possessions. we fail to bring order into ourselves. We have a beautiful order at home, but in here is a terrible mess. But when possessions are reduced, when we try to live according to the principle of the last yama, aparigraha, we try to reduce our possessions and try to live only with bare essentials, what we really need for our life, just to lead it comfortably so that we have enough time to practice yoga. Then such questions, these questions, he says, aparigraha sthairye, Patanjali, when he discusses aparigraha, reduced possessions, then questions such as janma kathanta, why this human birth? Why am I here? What am I doing here? Earlier, we are just busy with taking care of all the things. But when those things are reduced, then what am I doing here? Such questions arise. What is the real purpose of my life? Just to take care of these possessions, to bring some order every day in the morning, to press our shirts and pants, and then put them back into the closet, wear them, clean them, and then again. Is that all? Or is there something more meaningful to my existence? Usually, people these days refer to it with the negative term midlife crisis. When those childhood questions come up again, what am I doing here? Was this the purpose of my life? It's midlife crisis, get over it. But I think these questions should be asked. And when we go close to someone who has found that peace within, who has explored these questions by looking into themselves, by trying to find an answer. And that is just that person's answer. Ultimately, the work of these teachers is not to give us an answer, but to inspire us to undertake a journey to find our own answer. That is the most important aspect. And that's why they don't only give an answer, they just tell us how it seems to them. That is what Śvetāśvatara, 2,300 years ago, whoever he was, we don't know anything about this individual except his name, the one with the white mule, or with clarified senses. That's all what we know. But he does not only give us an answer, which is based on his 2,300 years old understanding, which might be meaningful to a great extent because he explored the human mind, and therefore his conclusions are to a great extent universal because all of us have the same human mind. But he doesn't stop there. He also gives us the practice. He talks about asana. He talks about pranayama. He talks about meditation. So that what he explored, we can explore for ourselves. And that is when the second meaning of the word Upanishad comes. First of all, it is sitting close to the teacher, to the external teacher, and the communion which takes place. That is Upanishad. That is this Upanishad. When a group of those who were well versed in discourse of the teachings, when a group of well versed teachers went to this great teacher, sat at his feet, then came Śvetāśvatara Upanishad. But then he also gives us the method to sit close to oneself. Not to sit close to an external teacher, but to sit close to the teacher that lies within. The teacher, the supreme teacher that Patanjali speaks about, the teacher of the most ancient teachers. We can talk about the most ancient teachers, Kapila, Shvetashvatara, Buddha, Patanjali, extremely ancient teachers. But even more ancient than those teachers is a teacher who is seated within the hearts of each one of us. And the purpose of an external teacher is to connect us with that internal teacher. And the teaching that comes as a person sits close to that inner teacher. That teaching is ultimately what the word Upanishad stands for. That's why Upanishad, in fact, stands for the living wisdom. The living wisdom that arises from within. Whenever the yogic masters speak of wisdom, they never speak of it arising from certain collection of teaching, from certain collection of books. Whenever the yogic masters speak of wisdom, they say, Tatsvayam yoga sansiddha, when your heart is perfected through the practice of yoga, then this wisdom is to be found within oneself. One of my teachers, Swami Veda, used to say this so often, that even if all these teachings are destroyed, are totally destroyed, annihilated, so many of these teachings have already been destroyed, forgotten, lost. Just a very few, chosen few are left. Shvetashvatara is one of them, extremely ancient. Just think how difficult it would have been to preserve this teaching as it is for the past 2,300 years. And yet he used to say that if just the humanity never forgets how to meditate, all these teachings will resurface again and again. They will again come back, because these teachings, they are ultimately within ourselves. So this is the wide meaning of the word Upanishad. But as a technical term, the word Upanishad is used for those sections of the Veda which are mystical in nature, which explore the inner reality. And that's why this is called Upanishad, because it belongs to one of the four Vedas, as you can see. And Upanishad from the Krishna Yajurveda, if you have explored a little bit, the most ancient collection of teachings in India, at least 3,500 years old. Then there are four Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda. This Śvetāśvatara Upanishad belongs to Yajurveda, which is the second most ancient. And because this contains mystical teachings and it's part of the Veda and clearly contains deeper mystical teachings, that is why it is referred to by the word Upanishad. In fact, the Upanishads themselves often use the word Upanishad as a synonym to yoga. Many times in the Upanishads, the word Upanishad is used totally in the meaning of yoga. So it's in fact even an extremely ancient synonym of the word yoga. So Upanishad and yoga, they are also both totally interchangeable in some of the Upanishad mantras. I have spoken about the time period of this text. I was referring to it as 3,300 years old. This is because modern scholarship believes that this text, according to the modern scholars today, particularly by modern scholarship, I mean Western modern Indologists, historians of the Indic literature, have basically concluded that this text shows characteristics that it was composed approximately around 300 BC, which means 2,300 years before Christ, 300 years before Christ, 2,300 years before us, a little bit, a few hundred years after the Buddha, at least in its present form, in the form in which it is available today as a text, in this, just in that form, because individual passages found in this Upanishad are extremely ancient. Some of the mantras, particularly the mantras on meditation, the mantras where the root yuj of yoga has been used, those mantras are extremely ancient, which means that they have been taken into this Upanishad from the most ancient sections of the Vedas. And when I speak about the most ancient sections, then according to the Western Indologists, that would be 3,500 years before now, which means at least 1,500 years before Christ. So individual sections of this Upanishad are extremely, some of the mantras are extremely ancient, but even in its present form, it is at least 2,300 years old. And because of this, it has been an extremely influential text. Mahabharata is world known. The Bhagavad Gita is world known. Today, Bhagavad Gita as a yoga shastra, as the instructions of yoga, it is together with Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the most widely read text on yoga. And the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita at least quotes 2 verses from Śvetāśvatara Upanishad. Mahabharata, the great epic from India, which was composed between 300 BC and 400 AD, of which Bhagavad Gita as a part, shows tremendous influence of Shvetashvatara Upanishad. This Upanishad has been quoted in the Mahabharata. It has been quoted in the Bhagavad Gita. And even some ancient Buddhist works, such as Abhidharma Mahavibhasha Shastra, a text which was translated into Chinese by, I never know how to pronounce, Xuanzang. Is the great Chinese translator who translated this Abhidharma Mahavibhasha Shastra. This text too quotes Śvetāśvatara Upanishad. So one of the early works of Buddhism already quotes this Upanishad. So this shows how ancient it is. Some other scholars of Kashmir Shaivism, because for Kashmir Shaivism, for the Shaiva yoga traditions, this is one of the greatest works, because it is the Upanishad, the most ancient Upanishad, which speaks of Shiva. Because all other 10 principal Upanishads, they don't speak of a particular deity. They always just speak of Brahman. Brahman, which means the omnipresent consciousness. But they don't give a particular name, Shiva, Vishnu. These particular names are totally avoided in any one of the Upanishads. In any one of the 10 Upanishads, the 10 Upanishads, these names, they don't arise. And when they arise in very universal meanings. So for example, the 11 Rudras mentioned in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad does not refer to any particular deity or its 11 manifestations, but to the 5 senses of perception, the 5 senses of action and the mind. These 11 are referred to as the 11 Rudras, so in a very universal significance. But this deity who gained tremendous prominence in the Hatha Yoga tradition from the 10th century onwards, because in the Hatha Yoga traditions, after Guru Gorakshanatha, after Matsyendranatha, all the Hatha Yoga texts, whether it is Shiva Samhita, whether it is Bhiranga Samhita, whether it is Hatha Yoga Pradipika, all these classical works on Hatha Yoga, the deity that they speak of is Shiva, or Adinatha, as they refer to it, the first Lord, the first master of yoga. On the other hand, in Raja Yoga, in Patanjali's tradition, it's mostly Vishnu. Even the symbology that we find in the image of Patanjali it revolves around Vishnu. And yet again, in Śvetāśvatara Upanishad, we find extremely ancient signs of Shiva. So, scholars of Shaivism and the Shaiva traditions of yoga, particularly known as Circa yoga, or which is compared to Kashmir Shaivism, which is quite popular these days in the West, with Lakshmanaju's teachings and great teachers such as Bettina Baumer, who often comes also to Rishikesh and has retreats on Shaiva teachings, on yoga. According to many of the modern Shaiva scholars, this text was composed in 600 BC. So, when was this text really composed? Who you ask, that's the answer you get. If you ask the Shaiva scholars of Kashmir Shaivism, they generally give the date of 600 BC. The general modern scholarship gives 300 BC. Traditional scholars, thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Extremely ancient work. So these are all superficial datings, but just to give a general idea of the antiquity of this work. Today, the time is gradually over. Next time, I will discuss a little bit the subject matter of each the chapter, so that in a nutshell we have an idea what the 6 chapters are about. Today, I think this much introduction to this text should be enough. If any questions? Why I like this text very much is when Guruji came here for the last time before he left his body. He came several times to Rishikesh and he used to visit his center, this center, his center. So, but when he came the last time, it was 2011, I think, in January. Yes. And he had come to Haridwar, and on his way back to the airport, he briefly came here, and he gave a very long discourse on how to be a sadhaka, thinking that Rishikesh, the land of sadhakas. So his understanding of how to be a sadhaka. Do we still have it? I think we removed it.
It was online.
I think we should put it online again, because after we changed the website, it's no more on there. But when he was, I was here. I was listening to his discourse, and I noticed something of my interest in his discourse, which he never otherwise ever I read anywhere else. Maybe somebody else has read it, I have not read it. He said that about alignment. Alignment is so central to Iyengar yoga, so unique to Guruji's practice. Always we speak of alignment. So he said that, do you know who gave me the plumb line for alignment? He said, Krishna, in the 6th chapter. It was in the 6th chapter, Samam Kaya Shiro Grivam, Krishna says that Sama means alignment, Samasthiti. So he speaks, Krishna in the 6th chapter in the context of asana and meditation, speaks of having a straight line between your back, neck and head. Straight line. So Guruji said that Krishna gave me the plumb line, and why should we only apply this to sitting postures? Let me apply to all postures. And that's how the idea of alignment originated in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, according to what Guruji said on that day. Now, from where did Krishna get his plumb line? Krishna got his plumb line from Shvetashvatara. Because Śvetāśvatara, the same terminology, and again, Śvetāśvatara Upanishad is more ancient than Krishna's Bhagavad Gita. So when Krishna is using exactly the same words, sama, again the word sama, which means alignment, balance. And when in the context of asana, Śvetāśvatara says, Trirunnadam, erect in 3 places, samam, totally aligned. In 3 places, again, he just says in 3 places, Krishna gives all the 3 places, body, neck and head. He does not list the 3 places. So Krishna has just added his explanation, but originally the plumb line of alignment comes from Śvetāśvatara. And so we can see him as the very source of samasthiti. Because this idea of sama, which is so central to the Upanishads, to lead a life which is in balance, which is totally aligned, to have thoughts which are aligned, to breathe aligned breath, and to sit in a fully aligned posture. So this idea of alignment, which was there already in the more ancient Upanishads, this idea of sama, which was originally learnt by observing the sun. He is the one who introduces it on a physical level, on the level of asana, which then inspired Krishna, which then inspired Guruji to bring back alignment to every posture. And that's why also Śvetāśvatara Upanishad has its unique place in our understanding of yoga. This was bonus because there was no question. Bonus information. Still no questions?
I have 3 questions.
Yes, okay. Yes.
Shavya is also speaking about Shama and Dhamma.
Yes. Shama and Dhamma.
Shama and Dhamma, but you also mentioned.
Yes.
So it's the same meaning.
Yes. Shama and Dhamma, when they list the 6. Shama, Dhamma, Uprati, Titiksha, Shraddha and Samadhan. Shama, which means inner peace. Dhamma means self-control. Uprati, which means selfless action. Titiksha is endurance, and Samadhana, focus, and faith in oneself. Shraddha, yes. So there, Shama and Dhamma, those 2 are mentioned. These 3 that I was talking about, they, in fact, the list of 6 and the list of these 3 both come from the same Upanishad. It was Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, both of them, just different contexts. And the context of those 6 are that with the help of these 6, one sees the true nature of the self within oneself. So these are the 6 preparatory wealths which you are talking about. They are the 6 preparatory wealths for self-realization. And these 3 that I was mentioning, they are seen as general education for everyone, which everybody, whether they want to pursue the path of self-realization or yoga or not, but these 3 things everybody should get trained in. Some self-control, some, because as human beings otherwise we have, even as children, we have the tendency to grasp. We always want to grasp at things, but giving is the opposite. Giving is releasing, so this tendency to release, this tendency to let go, all of that is included. This tendency to unload, which is what for the masters here, nourishment, usually by nourishment we understand the accumulation of a lot of knowledge, wealth, but on the path of yoga, nourishment comes by unloading, by giving away, not by accumulating, but by giving away. And the third one, compassion, which Shantarakshita in his Bhavana Krama says that if someone wants to become a Buddha, just let them cultivate compassion. One virtue, compassion, is enough to bring into the human being all the great virtues which transform a supta, an asleep person, into a Buddha, into a fully awakened human being. Kamalashila, sorry, not Shantarakshita, but sage Kamalashila, in his Bhavana Krama, in the very beginning, he says this. So this compassion, these 3 things are mentioned in the context of shiksha, in the context of education. So that's the 2 different contexts.
Behind there's a story.
Yes.
At that time, around the 6th century, the Chinese monk is usually called Mohayan.
Mohayan, yes.
He came to Tibet.
Yes.
Tried exploration as a one meditation method.
Yes.
The single pointed,
Yes.
nothing to do anything, focus on this one point.
Yes.
And then Kamalashila came to Tibet. And he, usually the Tibetan story is defeated by
Yes.
that Chinese monk.
Yes.
Then he is
In the Samye debate,
Yes.
very famous debate. Yes.
in Nalanda tradition.
Yes. When teachers came from
And
the
then he
Nalanda tradition.
meant it, as you say, a compassion practice. It's
Compassion.
just enough.
Enough. Yes. It was in that context
Yes.
that he said it. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yes. Yes. Central. Self-control, charity, and compassion. Okay, so let us conclude with the prayer which is there on the last page, which is the prayer for universal well-being. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग्